"If you knock me down, I'll give you $1 million, the general said. "Get the check ready," the black woman replied. The burst of laughter at the military training center sounded like thunder of contempt. General Richard Blackstone, 3 stars on his chest and decades of military leadership on his shoulders, had just heard the most absurd proposal of his career. "Do you want to fight me in battle?" The general's voice dripped with venom as his eyes slid over Maya's figure from top to bottom. A black woman, a civilian, thinks she can take down one of America's greatest military strategists. The training center at Fort Harrison Air Force Base had never seen such a scene. High-ranking officers stood around the perimeter of the main Totomi. Some whispered among themselves. Others silently watched the audacity of this uninvited guest who managed to bypass all the security to get to this place. "My name is Maya Thompson. I am 28 years old. I grew up on the most dangerous streets of Detroit, where I learned that survival doesn't depend on the size of your muscles, but on the strength you have inside. My brother Marcos was dishonorably discharged from the Army after questioning General Blackstone's cowardly order, an order that cost the lives of 12 innocent soldiers. Marcos tried to reveal the truth and was destroyed by the system. 3 months later, he committed suicide. In that moment, looking at the man who had destroyed my brother's life with his cowardly military decision, I knew that my entire journey had prepared me for this very moment. General Blackstone commanded the country's most prestigious military base with an iron fist. His reputation was built on controversial strategic victories and the pride he wore like armor. At the age of 58, 1 mem Ios 85 centimeter tall and weighing 95 bralco with still hard-trained muscles, he had never lost a single fight, never been doubted by his subordinates, and certainly never faced a challenge from a mere woman. "James," the general shouted to his communications officer, "how the hell did this woman get here? Where is the security?" Colonel James Miller, a nervous man of 45, approached hesitantly. "Sir, she said she had information on the Blackter case. The guards thought Blackstone's face was distorted. It was the code name for an operation that failed 3 years ago. An operation that Marcus Thompson questioned. An operation that Blackstone buried, along with the careers of anyone who dared to talk about it." Maya noticed a subtle change in the general's expression. "Here it is." She hit a sore spot. "My brother Marcos Thompson. Do you remember him?" "Yes." "Excellent sergeant, until he started doubting your suicidal orders." The general straightened his shoulders. His pride came back in a wave. Marcos Thompson was a weak soldier, emotional, and ill-adapted to the realities of war. I did the Army a favor by ridding us of him. The words hit Maya like bullets, but she showed no reaction. Years of fighting on the streets of Detroit taught her to turn pain into determination, rage, and deadly precision. "Do you know how much I spend per month training with the best martial arts instructors in the world?" Blackstone slammed his fist down on the metal table. $150,000. I have a black belt in 6 different disciplines: karate, judo, boxing, Muay Thai, Krav Maga, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've commanded military operations on 3 continents. I've defeated Olympic champions in one-on-one sparring. And you, a girl who's probably never stepped into a good dojo, are thinking, can you teach me a fighting technique? The officers around him started laughing, but the laughter sounded forced. They felt uncomfortable in Maya's presence. She wasn't intimidated by the size of the place, the uniforms full of medals, or the atmosphere of absolute military authority. Maya remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the generals. There was no fear in them, no doubt. Only a cold-blooded determination that sent a strange chill down Blackstone's spine. It felt like a predator lurking beneath the mask of prey. "If you can take me down," the general said, his voice amplified into a sadistic tone. "If you can keep me on my back for 3 seconds, I'll give you $1 million. He leaned forward, his smile widening into a wicked expression. "Enough money to get you out of this miserable life forever. But if you lose, and of course you will, I want you to leave here knowing your place in the world. I want you to understand that there are hierarchies that the likes of you can never topple." Colonel Miller whispered something in the general's ear. "Sir, maybe you shouldn't accept this challenge if it goes wrong." "It goes wrong," Blackstone laughed contemptuously. "James, look at her, a 135-pound woman against a 215-pound war veteran. This isn't a fight. It's a lesson in humility." The other officers were laughing louder now, fueling the atmosphere of humiliation the general loved so much. Create. To them, it was just another demonstration of Blackstone's absolute power over anyone who dared challenge him. Maya stepped forward, her voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "Ready the check." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. A moment, just a moment. General Richard Blackstone felt a feeling he hadn't felt in decades: uncertainty. There was an improbable certainty in this woman's eyes, a calm that defied all logic, but he quickly pushed it away. It was impossible. This woman was just a dreamer, about to receive a brutal lesson in reality and power. If you've been following this incredible journey of transformation, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss how this story will change everything you think about real power. Unknown to the general, Maya was holding a deadly secret, a skill honed on the toughest streets of America, one that would turn their fight into a lesson he would never forget. General Blackstone turned on the internal sound system, and his voice echoed throughout the military base. "Attention, soldiers! Cease all activity and report to the main training center. You are about to witness an educational demonstration on military hierarchy and the consequences of civil arrogance." Within minutes, hundreds of soldiers gathered at the tatami mats. Blackstone loved the audience. The greater the public humiliation, the more effective the lesson. "Soldiers," the general shouted, taking his place in the center of the tatami mats. "Today you will learn why our chain of command is sacred, why civil doubt is dangerous, and why military discipline cannot be questioned by emotional amateurs." Maya watched the general's every gesture, every movement, every breath. Years of surviving on the streets had taught her to read people like an open book. Blackstone was strong, experienced, but he had what would be his undoing: overestimation of his own strength. The general began to stretch demonstratively, displaying impressive flexibility for his 58 years. "Colonel Miller," he shouted, performing a series of warm-ups that resembled a fight dance. "Tell this crowd about my last sparring session with UFC champion Doc Mars," Miller spoke reluctantly. "Sir, you beat him in 2 rounds. 2 rounds, Blackstone repeated with a proud, toxic tone. "A 20-year-old professional in Olympic shape, and I snapped him like a twig." He turned to Maya, who stood motionless to the side. "You know what the difference is, girl? Discipline, strategy, mental superiority." The general didn't mention that Dick Williams was recovering from knee surgery and had agreed to spar more out of politeness than using real techniques, but truth was never the general's strong point. When it came to building her own mythology, Maya finally moved, removing her leather jacket. Underneath was a simple black t-shirt, revealing sculpted but not voluminous like a bodybuilder's, but compact, and functional hands shaped by necessity, not vanity. "Interesting," the general murmured, noticing the change in her posture. "Do you have real training, or is this just a theatrical performance for the public?" "On the streets of Detroit, training isn't optional," Maya replied. her voice calm, contrasting with the growing excitement around her. "This is survival." Blackstone snorted with disdain. "Street brawls. You call that preparation for decades of professional military training?" He gestured towards the surrounding soldiers. "These men and women have trained in lethal combat techniques for years. You think a few bar fights are going to make up the difference?" The general didn't know that Maya was being trained by Thomas Ghost Washington, a former Special Forces soldier who returned from the war and became an underground instructor in Detroit. Ghost taught real-world combat techniques to young people off the streets not for money, but because he believed that everyone should be able to protect themselves in a brutal world. "Tell me about your brother." Blackstone suddenly changed tactics. "Marcos Thompson, a weak, undisciplined soldier who couldn't accept the realities of modern warfare." Maya's jaw twitched almost imperceptibly. It was the first time she'd shown emotion since she arrived. "Marcos was better than both of us," Maya replied in a controlled tone. "Brave enough to serve, honest enough to question criminal orders, strong enough to try to save innocent lives. Criminal." Blackstone's voice soared an octave higher. "I've had to make difficult decisions in impossible situations. War is the death of soldiers. Girl, that's the nature of business. Your brother was too emotional to understand that. 12 soldiers died in vain." Maya took a step toward the center of Tatomi. Marcos had spotted the ambush. "He warned that the position was compromised. You ignored his message and sent the patrol straight to certain death." The silence in the gym grew tense. Some of the senior soldiers exchanged glances. They remembered Operation Blackweather. They remembered the rumors after the incident. Inaccurate information, amateurish analysis, indecisiveness on the field, Blackstone snapped. But a new hardness appeared in his posture. Marcos Thompson was a mediocre soldier who tried to challenge his superior's orders. His disobedience was duly punished, and he lacked the character to accept the consequences. He had the character to commit suicide rather than accept what you did to him, Maya said. And for the first time, real emotion crept into her voice. The anger that exploded in response was instant and devastating. Weak soldiers make weak decisions. If he couldn't cope with the reality of war, he shouldn't have joined the army in the first place. Maya watched the general's emotional outburst with clinical interest. Unbridled rage was a weakness, and she had just learned how to exploit it. "Are you ready to learn your lesson?" Blackstone asked, stepping into the center of the Tatomi. "Or do you need a few more minutes to accept that you're about to be publicly shamed?" Maya moved toward the center of the tatami with smooth, almost cat-like movements. No rush, no hesitation, only a deadly confidence that caused several soldiers in the room to lean forward, suddenly interested in what was about to happen. "Simple rule," the general announced to the crowd. "The first one to put the opponent down on his back and holds him for 3 seconds wins. No weapons, no lethal blows, only pure combat techniques." The general had no idea that Maya had done more than simply survive the streets of Detroit. She had mastered a hybrid fighting system that combined real military techniques with the brutality necessary to survive in a lawless land. The battle that was about to begin would be more than just a physical fight. It would be a reckoning and an inevitable revenge that would forever change the meaning of power on this military base. Absolute silence reigned in the gym as both fighters took positions in the center of the mat. Blackstone performed a rigid military bow of respect, formal, designed to demonstrate superiority even in simple gestures. Maya simply nodded, not taking her eyes off his. "Soldiers," the general shouted to the crowd, "watch how discipline triumphs over improvisation, how years of training destroy amateurish pride." Blackstone's first strike was devastating. Decades of experience poured into a precise thrust. A straight, followed by a hook that cut through the air like a blade. Maya dodged it by millimeters, but the gust of air from the blow caught her face. The room cried out in unison. "First lesson," the general muttered, already circling Maya like a predator. "Military speed trumps street reflexes." Blackstone attacked again, this time with 3 punch combinations, forcing Maya back to the edge of the tatami. His movements were precise, calculated, the result of years of practice. The 4th blow landed on Maya's shoulder, causing her to stagger. The soldiers began to applaud. This was exactly what they had expected. The commander was demonstrating absolute superiority over the brazen civilian. "You should surrender while you can," Blackstone whispered, pinning Maya to the edge of the tatami. "Otherwise, it will only get worse." But something was wrong. Maya dealt a serious blow and smiled not with a face distorted by pain, but with a sincere, almost grateful smile. "Thank you," she said simply. The general frowned. "Thank you. For what? For not being afraid to show how you fight?" The answer cooled the general's blood. There was a confidence in Maya's voice that didn't match someone who had just been drunk in a duel. It seemed like she was just collecting information, studying, learning. The second round started with a more aggressive Blackstone. He unleashed a flurry of punches that would have broken almost any opponent. Boxing combinations backed up by Muay Thai strikes. Maya kissed the blows, dodging with small, economical, precise movements. "Stop running," the general shouted. Breathing was already heavy. "I'm not a man," Maya replied, and counterattacked for the first time. It was a movement that none of the soldiers present had seen before. Maya slipped under the general's hook and applied a technique that seemed like an impossible mix of capoeira, jiu-jitsu, and something completely indefinable. Blackstone found himself on the floor in confusion before he managed to quickly roll over and get up. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, but the confidence had vanished from his voice. In fact, Maya was trained by the Ghost Washington in a system he called the Urban Survival System, a deadly combination of formal military techniques and adaptations developed on the country's toughest streets. It wasn't pretty, did not follow the rules of sport, but was devastatingly effective. Blackstone went on the attack again, using his advantage in weight and reach. He managed to grab Maya in a painful hold, which should have ended the fight. His experience in jiu-jitsu came into play. Dominant position, complete control, increasing pressure. "The end," he said, increasing the pressure. "You fight pretty well for an amateur, but you don't have the strength to get out of here." Maya closed her eyes for a moment. The ghost's voice sounded in her thoughts. "When they think they control you, that's your most vulnerable moment. Strength, not in the muscles of May. The power is in finding the angle they can't see." What happened in the next 3 seconds caused the entire audience to fall into absolute silence. Maya didn't try to use brute force against the pain hold. Instead, she used Blackstone's own weight against him, employing a release technique that turned the general's dominant position into a trap. In a fluid motion that defied the laws of physics, she broke free and put Blackstone in a difficult position. The general found himself face down on the floor. Maya controlled his spine with a painful technique he couldn't even identify. It wasn't traditional jiu-jitsu. It wasn't wrestling. This was not something he had encountered in decades of formal training. "Impossible," muttered Colonel Miller, leaning forward. Blackstone managed to break free, but was visibly shaken. For the first time in decades, someone had found his blind spot on defense. Someone showed that his military superiority is not absolute. You had a good teacher, the general said, breathing heavily as he rose. But street techniques have their limitations. It's time you learned about real military combat. Then Blackstone did something that completely changed the dynamic of the fight. He looked at the soldiers in the room and made a decision that would reveal who he really was beneath all the medals and awards. "Soldiers," he shouted, "this is no longer a training demonstration. This is a matter of national security. A civilian uses unidentified techniques against a senior officer. Delta 7 protocol is now in effect." A murmur of noise went through the crowd. Delta C protocol meant neutralizing the threat by any means necessary. Maya noticed a change in Blackstone's eyes. The game of sports fighting is over. The general was going to use all his deadly weapons, all the techniques he had learned over decades of real war, without thinking about safety or the consequences. This was exactly what she expected, because no one in this room, not even the general himself, knew that Maya had spent the last 3 years preparing specifically for this moment, studying Blackstone's every move, his every pattern, his every weakness. And now, finally, he was going to show his true face. The Delta 7 protocol instantly changed the atmosphere in the room. The soldiers, who only seconds before had been watching a training demonstration, were now witnessing something far more sinister. Blackstone had just authorized the use of lethal force against an unarmed civilian, and everyone knew what that meant. "Sir," Colonel Miller whispered, approaching hesitantly, "Delta 7 protocol is designed for active terrorist threats. There is no civil war here. She represents exactly what I say she represents." Blackstone interrupted without taking his eyes off Maya. "Threat to military order. Demonstration of unidentified techniques that compromise our operational security." Maya watched the general's transformation with almost scientific interest. This was what she expected. 3 years of careful preparation came down to provoking Blackstone and forcing him to show his true self, a disrespectful soldier and a predator hiding behind authority. No one in the room knew that Maya was secretly recording every conversation, every meeting, every moment of this calculated provocation. A microscopic recording device, provided by a former colleague of journalist Marcos, captured every word, every illegal order that Blackstone was about to give. "Soldiers," shouted the general. His voice carried military authority. "Form a circle of entourage. No one is to enter or leave until the situation is resolved." And then Maya did something no one expected. She sat in the center of the tatami, crossing her legs and closing her eyes. "What the hell are you doing?" Blackstone barked. "Getting ready," Maya replied calmly, without opening her eyes. The answer only angered the general further. "Getting ready for what?" "To die." Maya slowly opened her eyes, and when she looked at Blackstone, there was something different about her. A deadly cold that made several soldiers instinctively step back. "3 years ago," Maya said. Her voice carried a heaviness that had not been there before. "When my brother took his own life, I made a promise not only to him, but to every soldier who died because of your cowardly decisions." Blackstone felt a chill down his spine. There was something deeply uncomfortable in the change in Maya's tone. "I spent 1905 days preparing for this moment." Maya continued, slowly rising, studying every movement, every behavioral pattern, every psychological weakness you hide behind this form. The general laughed, but it was a strained laugh. "Have you been studying me, girl? I'm a closed book to the likes of you." "The likes of who?" Maya tilted her head. "You mean those who know that the UFC champion you beat was recovering from knee surgery? Those who know that your Medal of Honor was given for a surgery you didn't personally command. Those who know about the $12 million stolen from the Veterans Fund. The silence that spread through the room was deafening. Blackstone visibly paled. "You are fabricating slander," he said, but his voice lacked its former strength. Maya smiled a smile that chilled the blood of everyone present. "Thomas Washington taught me more than martial arts, General. He taught me military investigation. He taught me how to find the truth behind official lies. The Ghost." Blackstone knew that name. Thomas the Ghost. Washington had been one of the military's finest investigators until he was dismissed under mysterious circumstances. Circumstances that Blackstone now recalled with growing horror were connected to some of his own dubious operations. "Impossible," the general muttered. "The Ghost is dead. We confirmed his death in Detroit a few years ago." "The Ghost is alive," Maya said calmly. "He taught me how to take down corrupt officers hiding behind uniforms they don't deserve to wear." This admission struck Blackstone as if he were young. If the Ghost was alive, if he had trained this woman, then the whole situation was far more dangerous than he thought. The Ghost knew secrets that could not only ruin his career, but also send him to a military prison for the rest of his life. "You think you're watching a fight?" Maya said, now addressing the surrounding soldiers directly. "But in reality, you're witnessing an execution, the career execution of a man who turned the army into his personal playground. If you're following this carefully planned revenge, subscribe to the channel, because what's coming next will redefine everything you think about military justice." Blackstone looked around, and for the first time, noticed that many of the soldiers were no longer looking at him with admiration. Some were confused, others clearly shocked by the revelations. Decades of unchallenged power were crumbling on live television. "It doesn't matter what you think," Blackstone said, trying to regain control. "It doesn't matter what lies the Ghost told you. You are now a threat that must be neutralized." Maya adopted a fighting stance that none of the soldiers present recognized. It wasn't boxing, it wasn't MMA, it wasn't traditional military style. It was something hybrid, deadly, designed specifically to destroy larger, stronger opponents. "The difference between us, General," Maya said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, "is that you fight to protect your lies, and I fight to honor the dead." What happened in the next seconds forever changed the history of this military base and showed that real war sometimes happens not on distant battlefields, but in the very heart of the institutions we swear to protect. Maya's first move in this new phase of the fight was like a symphony of calculated violence. She didn't attack Blackstone, but steamed him move after move, showing that every technique he boasted had a fatal weakness. The J-eep that the general delivered with a fatal confident punch was deflected by Maya with a twist of the wrist that threw him off balance. The next hook was intercepted by a block that redirected Blackstone's own force against him, sending him staggering to the edge of the mat. "Impossible," someone from the crowd of soldiers muttered. But Maya was just getting started. Blackstone didn't know that the Ghost had been secretly recording his every training session for years. Every move, every pattern, every tendency had been analyzed, studied, and turned into a personalized fighting strategy designed specifically to destroy Richard Blackstone. The general quickly recovered and unleashed a series of Muay-Thai punches that broke the ribs of smaller opponents. Maya danced around the blows as if choreographing a performance. Each dodge was calculated not just to avoid damage, but to place Blackstone exactly where she wanted. "Are you kidding me?" the general growled. His breathing was already heavy after just 2 minutes. "No," Maya replied, launching a counterattack that forced Blackstone to retreat. "I'm teaching you." The devastating truth began to reveal itself to everyone present. Maya didn't fight to win. She fought to humiliate. Every movement showed that she could have ended the fight at any moment, but she preferred to prolong the general's agony. Blackstone attempted to apply his most reliable technique, jujutsu, a throwing move that worked against professional champions. Maya didn't just defend herself. She turned the attempt into a demonstration of the general's growing incompetence. Using his own momentum, she threw him to the floor with such force that the tatami shook. "Get up," Maya said calmly as Blackstone struggled for breath. "Your soldiers need to see what your commander is really capable of." The public humiliation worked exactly as May had planned. The soldiers who worshipped Blackstone as the god of Vine now saw him fighting to stay on his feet against a simple civilian woman. The myth of his invincibility was crumbling in real time, and then the first devastating turn happened. Maya stopped fighting, simply stopped, took 3 steps back, and raised her hands. "What are you doing?" Blackstone cried out, confused by the sudden change. Maya smiled that same smile that cooled the blood of everyone present. "General, you said this was a matter of national security, right?" "Yes," he replied. "So you don't mind that this demonstration is being broadcast live to the Pentagon?" The silence that followed was absolute. Blackstone turned noticeably pale. "Lies," he muttered. Maya carefully touched the small device near her ear. "General Morrison?" she asked. "Yes, sir. General Blackstone has just authorized the use of lethal force against an unarmed civilian. Everything is according to plan." The second turn was even more destructive. A familiar voice came from the speakers that Maya had hacked remotely before the battle. "Richard is General Morrison from the Pentagon. This operation was sanctioned by the High Command. The investigation into your illegal actions has been ongoing for 6 months. Luckily, Thompson is our undercover agent." Blackstone's world collapsed in an instant. Maya was more than just a victim seeking revenge. She was a special military agent, trained by the ghost of Washington himself under direct orders from the Pentagon. The whole situation was a carefully planned trap to force Blackstone to publicly expose himself. "No," Blackstone whispered, staggering back. "This can't be happening. Marcos's justice operation," Maya declared, now with official military authority in the voice. "A 6-month undercover investigation into corruption, embezzlement of military funds, and criminal negligence that led to the deaths of 12 American soldiers in Operation Blackweather." The soldiers around him began to back away from Blackstone, realizing that they had witnessed not just a battle, but the fall of a corrupt commander. But May is not finished yet. The third and final turn was the most brutal. "General Blackstone," Maya said, striking a stern military pose, "on behalf of the Supreme Command of the United States Armed Forces, you are under arrest for treason, corruption, criminal negligence, and the murder of 12 American soldiers in Operation Blackweather." Blackstone tried to escape. Then Maya showed why she had been chosen for this mission. In 3 fluid moves, combining everything the ghost had taught her, she felled the general with such force that the room echoed with a roar. His back hit the ground like a crack of thunder. 2, 3, Maya counted out loud. $1 million was earned, but money was never the real goal. "Soldiers," Maya shouted. Her voice rang with absolute authority. "You had just witnessed the fall of a traitor, a man who had turned military honor into a commodity for his own gain." Blackstone lay on the floor, destroyed not only physically, but mentally, professionally, utterly. Decades dedicated to building a false reputation were destroyed in 15 minutes of naked truth. But Maya's revenge was not yet complete. What she had prepared for these final moments would forever change the way these soldiers perceived justice, honor, and the true meaning of service to their country. The handcuffs Maya placed on Blackstone rang in the room like bells of justice. Each click of metal on the former general's wrists signaled the end of an era of corruption that had defiled military honor for decades. Soldiers, Maya said. Her voice now carried not only authority, but also a deep emotion she had carefully suppressed throughout the entire operation. You served under a man who twisted your sacred oath into a convenient lie. Blackstone tried to speak, but his words were lost in sobs of despair. The man who moments ago had commanded with an iron fist now lay broken, not only physically but spiritually destroyed by the revelation of his own deceitful deeds. Maya turned to the soldiers watching her silently. My brother, Marcos Thompson, died believing he had failed as a soldier. He spent his last days believing himself weak, inadequate, unworthy of the uniform he wore with pride. Tears streamed down Maya's face, the first tears she had allowed herself since the beginning of this 3-year journey. The truth is, Marcos was the best of us all, brave enough to question criminal orders when everyone else remained silent, strong enough to choose death over living a lie. Colonel Miller approached hesitantly, removing his military uniform. Miss Thompson, we wouldn't have known if we had known about Black Whiter's operations. You knew, Maya interrupted. But there was no reproach in her voice, only deep sadness. You all knew something was wrong. Soldiers don't die in vain, without warning, without rumors, without doubts. The silence that fell over the room was the silence of collective recognition. Maya walked to the plaque on the wall of the gymnasium dedicated to the soldiers who had fallen in battle. Respectfully, she added to it the small plaque she had carried with her for 3 years. Sergeant Marcos Thompson died defending the truth when others chose silence. This operation was more than just the arrest of a corrupt official, Maya said. Her voice echoed throughout the hall. It was a restoration of what you had lost by not realizing the ability to question, to resist, to refuse to accept injustice simply because it disguises itself as power. One of the youngest soldiers stepped forward. Maya, what should we do now? How to recover from all this? Maya smiled. Sincere, filled with hope, a smile forged in the fire of pain. You're doing what Marcos would do. Question every order, stand up for each other, and never let the fear of conflict stop you from doing what's right. General Morrison emerged from the shadows of the gymnasium, accompanied by military investigators. His personal presence confirmed that everything was completely real, and that the operation had received the legal approval of the highest military command. Soldiers, Morrison said, his voice carrying decades of genuine authority, you have witnessed a rare phenomenon. True military justice. Not the kind of justice that protects institutions, but the kind that protects people. Blackstone was led out silently, his medals and orders removed one by one as he was led out of the gym. Decades of false glory were crumbling in real time. Maya remained in the center of the tatami, watching the soldiers around her. Some were crying, others seemed lost. Many felt a complex mixture of relief and shame. There is one last thing I need to say, Maya announced. Her voice cut through the quiet noise spreading throughout the hall. General Blackstone's money, the $1 million he promised, will be put entirely into the fund we are creating. A fund for the families of soldiers who dared to question illegal orders and were persecuted for it. The latest revelation hit everyone like a wave of pure emotion. Maya sacrificed 3 years of her life and underwent rigorous military training, risked everything not for money and glory, but for something much more valuable than justice, for those who could no longer fight for themselves. Marcos Thompson did not die in vain, Maya said. Now her voice carried a power that surpassed any military authority. He died, sowing the seed of resistance that grew secretly for 3 years. Today, this seed has finally sprouted. The applause began with some hesitation, then grew louder and turned into an ovation that lasted for several minutes. It was a round of applause, not just for May, but for the idea that truth was still possible, that justice could still prevail, that individual soldiers could still make a difference. 6 months later, Fort Harrison Air Force Base has become a model of transparency and military accountability. Soldiers who witnessed Blackstone's fall became active defenders of ethical practices, questioning orders when necessary to protect comrades from unjust reprisals. Maya Thompson returned to civilian life, but her influence remained. The Marcos Thompson Foundation has exceeded all expectations, supporting dozens of military families facing persecution for doing the right thing. And on quiet nights, when Maya walked the streets of Detroit, where it all began, she was sure that Marcos was finally resting in peace. Not only because his death was avenged, but because his courage inspired change that will last for generations. Sometimes true victory lies not in overthrowing those who abuse power, but in planting seeds of courage that grow long after individual battles are over. Marcos Thompson planted these seeds with his life. Maya watered them with 3 years of indomitable determination. And now a new generation of soldiers carries those seeds forward, ensuring that military honor is not just a pretty phrase in manuals, but an everyday reality, expressed in every decision, in every moment when someone chooses to do the right thing over the easy one. If this journey of justice and change has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that a determined person can change the world. Because, in the end, the biggest lesson Maya Thompson taught wasn't about a fight or a place, but about something far more powerful. When we fight in memory of those we love, when we turn pain into purpose, when we refuse to accept injustice as inevitable, we can move mountains, topple tyrants, and plant gardens of hope, where once there were deserts of despair.